Let's bring in our guest for this hour. We have national trial attorney Alexis Rosenberg with us. And Alexis, you heard the sister being asked more questions about this guardianship. A lot has been made of that inside of this courtroom, whether or not the victim here gave her children. We know she did turn over her custody of her children to her mother-in-law, so the defendant's mother. And then where there's this question of whether she was attempting to dissolve it. What do you think the jurors are taking away from this issue of the victim saying, I no longer want to be the guardian of my children? Is it probative for them?
I think it will have some effect, and it is probative, because I think that it may show, and they may say that it looked like she was going to leave, that she was going to take off, she didn't want to care for her children any longer, and so that the explanation as to why the defendant did not alert the authorities she was gone or found it suspicious that she was missing would follow that it made sense to him.
As far as the defense case, how do you think it's going so far? We know they are going to want to point the finger at a lot of people, some of whom cannot come into the courtroom, including the victim's father, Carl Patton, we've heard so much about, who was a convicted serial killer, but he passed away last year. How do you think it's going so far?
I think cold cases are difficult for the prosecution for the reasons that you just mentioned, that we have witnesses that were present have now passed, or we can't find them, or even their memory is not as fresh because it was so long ago. I mean, this case was in 1996. That was an extremely long time ago. And I think that is a problem for the prosecution.
To talk about this case, Alexis, have you heard of a case that has gone on for this long? You're there in Florida, 11 years we're talking as far as when this first happened. And as I mentioned earlier, this isn't a cold case. This isn't a situation where they didn't have any idea who may have done it. After 2 years, prosecutors really started to put together the pieces. All of the criminal complaints named the Adelsons, but they didn't start getting charged until 2022 when Charlie Adelson was charged. Tell me your thoughts overall in this case as we are waiting for these openings to start.
Well, it is very interesting. You brought up a very good point. This isn't a cold case. This was an active case, and then they waited so long to charge. I mean, and they didn't charge everybody together at the same time, which is also interesting, and which brings up, is the daughter, Wendy, eventually going to be charged the way this is unfolding? So it is interesting how they're taking them one at a time and doing that. It's also going to be interesting who's going to come testify, who is the prosecution going to bring in, because they don't have to follow the same script that they did with the other cases, significantly the case having to deal with her son that was ultimately convicted. So it will be interesting. I don't think the son is going to come testify. However, I do think the likelihood is that the other conspirators will probably testify.
Oh, interesting analysis and prediction on that, Alexis. I'm also interested that you said you think that they don't have to stick to the script, because what I'm going to be paying attention to, I sat through the 2023 trial for Charlie Adelson, and we, of course, all watched together the Catherine McBanawa and Sigfredo Garcia trials. They did stick to a similar script. They added on, of course, once Charlie was in the mix and actually there at the defense table. But the general plan and idea, it has been consistent throughout these trials. And I'm going to be paying attention to how the prosecution, Georgia Kappelman, we anticipate will be doing that opening, how she's going to show these jurors that Donna Adelson was not just someone who helped after the fact, like an accessory to this case, was not just someone who perhaps knew what her son was doing. But do you believe that they have to prove, in order to get to conspiracy to commit murder, that she had an active role in the planning, and that they have to prove that beyond a reasonable doubt?
Well, they don't have to prove that she was the matriarch and she was the one that came up with everything. They do not have to prove that for conspiracy. It really is that they had this agreement, she had knowledge of it, and she participated in it. So as much as there has been testimony that in previous trials that in the previous trial that she was the mastermind and it was her idea. They don't have to show that for conspiracy. I think that they're going to go with the theme that that's what she was. She was the mastermind. It was her idea, and she was orchestrating the whole entire thing. And but for her, this would not have happened in this particular trial. But that is not the extent that they have to prove it to.
Let's talk about the defense for a second. I've been inside that courtroom. I saw Donna Adelson watching the jurors, the prospective jurors, as they walked in. She faced them. I saw some slight nods to them as they walked by her in the single file. She's very congenial with her attorneys. I was happy to see that in terms of wanting different, attorneys to work out well with their client. This is a new team for her. They were not her initial attorneys when she was arrested. She had a very trusted attorney for about a year, Daniel Roshbaum, who had been the family lawyer for many years, and then everything abruptly changed, and she has a new team. They've been on the case for about a year as well now, but it seems like she's very congenial with them, that she's able to chat with them and talk to them very easily. She was taking a lot of notes. She was just seeming to comment to them a lot more than your average defendant, but that's not surprising based on what we know about Donna Adelson. But in terms of their defense case, do you think they are going to be sticking with the exact same defense that Charlie Adelson had versus one that may claim ignorance and claim that maybe my son told me that I had to do these things, but I didn't know exactly why?
I think it's going to be a combination. Obviously, she is presenting, and the way she's coming into the court, she has gray hair. She's not dyeing her hair. She is presenting very grandma-esque and old, and kind of like she's just this little old grandma. And I think it's going to be a combination of sticking to the story, but also that she didn't know this was going on. That wasn't her intent. She had no idea. Of course, she loved her grandchildren, but not to the extent of orchestrating her son-in-law's death.